even on the morning of the 15th of September, Battle of Britain Day, they're nursing hangovers again.
Yeah.
Get into the cockpit, take a big breath of oxygen, pop a bit of Benzedrine or something.
Sort yourself out for the day.
Sort yourself out for the day, ready to sort of scrap with the Hun. And so here am I in my Spit. There's this ME bearing down on me. You'd shove that on, you step into it, strap it up, and you look at your fuel gauge going, it's in the Luftwaffe, you're just flying and flying and flying.
There's just one thing for the fighter command guys to do, and that's defend their country. Well, welcome to Walking the Ground with me, Al Murray, and James Holland, and we are walking the ground, Jim, today at Biggin Hill.
Yes, we are. It's one of the main sector stations in 11 Group. Saw a huge amount of action in the Battle of Britain. Was absolutely pounded relentlessly by the Luftwaffe.
Yep.
But was also home to a number of rotating squadrons over that summer. Not least 32 Squadron,
Yep.
flying Hurricanes, of which...
Hurricanes,
yes, of which Pete Brothers was a mainstay, a chap I got to know very well, who was a totally brilliant person. But also 92 Squadron. I think, one has one's little favourites.
Yeah.
And we're talking about the few in this episode, and I thought it'd be fun to focus on a bit on 32 Squadron, but also on 92 Squadron. Flying Spitfires, and I actually got to know a number of them. I got to know the widow of Tony Bartley.
Right.
Got access to all his papers and logbooks and all the rest of it, so I felt very kind of attached to him, and he was just a brilliant writer and a really funny, musing person. Absolutely hellraiser, but very funny. But also Alan Wright and Jeff Wellham, and they were the first two Spitfire pilots that I ever interviewed, way before Jeff became famous with First Light. And I remember going to see him in a pub down in Cornwall, and he was just brilliant because, he picked up my pint, picked up his, said, so here am I in my Spit, there's this ME bearing down on me, and I just thought, that is just, that's what you want from it.
That's perfect. And this Gate Guardian here, this Spitfire, is done up as Jeff's plane, right?
Yeah, exactly. The plane that he flew here at Biggin Hill from the 17th of September 1940, so on Black Saturday, over Battle of Britain Day, Sunday the 15th of September, all through those incredibly tumultuous days and weeks at the back end of the Battle of Britain. He was here, flying from here, and a place that has been completely transformed, it has to be said, from the end of the war, but still has the chapel, still has a museum, still has little remnants like the buildings over there. They're kind of wartime.
Well, and when you're on the airstrip, you can see London. It's one of the really striking things about it. You can see down into the city from the hill here. And if you drive here through South London, there's an awful lot of South London to drive through before you get here, which really brings home how this is the big station outside the city.
On the hill,
overlooking it for defending it. You really get the sense of that when you come here.
You really do.
And the chapel is over there, and
there's a ghost along this road of a pilot.
Is there?
Yeah. And there's the White Hart at Brasted, which the pilots used to go to.
Right.
There used to be the big board, there used to be a chalkboard in the pub there, which everyone used to sign, including Sailor Milan and Al Deer and various other kind of legends, and Bob Stanford Tuck and so on, as well as, Jeff and Alan Wright and Pete Brothers and so on. But I thought, first of all, I think what we need to do is sort of have a look at a typical day in the life of a Battle of Britain pilot. I mean, what was that 24 hours? What was it like? What was expected of them? And how did they spend those hours?
And if you got through it, how did you unwind at the end of the day?
Very much so,
yeah. It's getting into that part of the week.
Yeah,
I'll start doing my mortar impression.
Okay. Go on, just do it, come on. Do your MG42. Oh God, it was just terrible when you started doing that.
Okay.
I'm so easily amused.
Here we are, Jim, at one of the other, legendary fighter stations of the Battle of Britain.
RAF Northolt.
RAF Northolt. And in this hut...
It's an original dispersal hut.
Yes, absolutely amazing.
This is where the men of 303 Polish Kosciuszko Squadron would have sat just out there where the cars are now. That's where the Hurricanes would have been. And it is absolutely amazing because I think there's one other dispersal hut, which is 609 Squadrons dispersal hut in Middle Wallop.
Right.
It's covered in asbestos, you can't get anywhere near it.
Yeah. Well, they've mercifully cleared the asbestos out. We just had the station commander's chat. He explained to us that we've cleared the asbestos out.
Yeah.
We're trying to restore it to how it must have appeared. And
they've got a fridge full of Spitfire beer.
I know, they're doing their best.
They're doing their best. Yeah. But also it's got the right colour scheme, hasn't it? This twin tone, which is very sort of wartime, and the crisscrosses on the windows and all that. It's all fantastic.
Right, but
I just thought it'd be good to do a day in the life of the Battle of Britain pilot. You know what you'd expect. And the bottom line is you're up before dawn.
Yeah.
You know, every day you're up in the dark. You know, it doesn't matter whether it's high summer, it's still in July when it's obviously much lighter, or by September when it's getting darker. Yeah. You're up before dawn, you're going down into the truck, kid it out, and off you go. And then you're at readiness.
Yeah.
And there'll be a chalkboard in the dispersal hut which will say which pilots are on duty. Because generally speaking, if you're a fighter command squadron, you would have 22 to 24 pilots to get 12 airborne at any one time.
Right, and they're in rotation. So if you were busy yesterday, you probably get the day off. Right?
Yeah, well, you might be on duty in the morning, you might be on duty in the afternoon. It was sort of, you know, there wasn't a sort of strict rota on this kind of stuff.
But it's about keeping people fresh and keeping people.
Well, and this was a very big thing from Dowding. Dowding was absolutely, completely set. He's very much in the Monty mould that you needed your sleep, and you needed your pilots fresh.
Yeah. Right.
And you rotated squadrons in and out. So you were, 32 squadron might be at Biggin Hill in July and much of August. Then they're moved and they're put somewhere kind of in a slightly less frenetic part of England.
Yeah. And lots of people have come through university flying clubs and stuff.
Yeah. There's volunteer reserves.
Yeah.
There's the auxiliary squadrons, which were the kind of sort of posh boys.
Yeah.
There was City of London, West Riding, which was 609, and so on. And they tended to be the sort of reasonably well-to-do people who would get flying training at the weekends and so on. They're like the TA.
Yeah. But with the tinge of flying being novel and accessible, and after all, what it takes to train a modern fighter pilot, you're not looking at the great long process like that, are you? There are people who are drawn in who can fly anywhere. They're flying with the RAF reserve, volunteer reserve. So how many hours? Because there is this, I think, this kind of mythic idea, isn't there, that they'd had very little training. They'd only had a couple of hours.
No, that's absolutely nonsense. It's just absolutely nonsense. So basically, you did your initial training. Then you did your secondary training, then you got your wings, and then you went to an OTU, an operational training unit. Yeah. By the time you're going to an operational training unit, you should have at least 150 hours in your logbook.
Right.
And then you would top that up. Now, when people say, we're having to cut training, what they really mean is they're cutting training of the OTU, the operational training unit, and that is where you're being converted from, say, a Harvard trainer to...
So it's
a Spitfire Hurricane.
So it's time on type is the
time on type.
Yeah, but generally or ideally you're getting 20 hours on a Spitfire Hurricane before you come to a squadron.
What is happening in August is because there is this drain of pilots. Yeah. They're cutting the hours of the OTU.
Yeah.
In reality, that didn't actually make a huge amount of difference because very, very few squadron commanders are going to send up a sprog who's just arrived wet behind the ears and who doesn't know what they're no use to them.
Yeah.
So they don't send them up. And don't forget, a squadron at full strength is 20 to 24 pilots.
Yeah.
So when they say we're operating by the beginning, Park and Dowding, Park commander of 11 Group, Dowding commander-in-chief of Fighter Command, when they're saying at the beginning of September, we've got a pilot crisis, our squadrons are only at 75% strength, what they really mean is they've got 16 to 18 pilots, not 24. But you're still only sending 12 up.
Yeah.
And what that means is your experienced pilots are having to fly more. But the most anyone would ever have to fly in one day is 4 times, and that's an exception.
Yeah.
Usually, you'd rarely fly more than once.
Yeah.
Sometimes you might fly twice.
Yeah.
But very often, one of those would be an X-raid, and an X-raid is where an enemy's reported, you're scrambled, you take off, you never see anything, and you come back again. Yeah. So you're not actually seeing combat.
But these squadrons are being rotated around the whole of Fighter Command anyway, so you might be...
Well, they are, but 3 weeks is a long time at the height of the Battle of Britain.
Yeah.
And you would suffer a lot of casualties in that time, and that would really hurt.
And then you'd go out to 12 Group and regroup. You'd be sent to Wales.
Or you'd be sent to 13 Group up in the north, or whatever. You'd suddenly go to find yourself in Actington in Northumberland. The big change happens on the 7th of September when Keith Park suggests the classification, squadron classification, which they hadn't had up to that point. And they reclassify them A, B, and C. And an A squadron is one which is, experienced pilots. A B squadron is a mix, sort of 50-50. So you've got people a bit wet behind the ears, just come out of OTU, Operational Training Unit. And that might be an Exeter, somewhere like that.
Yeah.
And then you have a C, which is maybe 3 or 4 experienced pilots, but the rest are kind of new boys who've just come out of OTU. And that might be an Acklington or Drem up in Edinburgh or something, where occasionally a lone, Junkers 88 might come across the North Sea from Stavanger in Norway or something. And that would give them the opportunity to increase their hours in their logbook on type and learn from the experts, the people who've experienced. So I think there is one example of one person being sent to a squadron straight away without going to an OTU.
So that's that.
And that is the absolute exception. It is not the norm. And there is this myth that's grown up that this was absolutely standard. It really, really wasn't. And the squadron classification solves that problem in a trice. So in a day, you would feel tired because you're getting up very early and you're not getting much sleep. And because you're a young person, you're still not going to bed till 11 o'clock.
And you're under tremendous strain.
And you're on tremendous strain. You're catnapping through the day. Yeah. You might be here in the dispersal hut. If it's a nice sunny day, you'd be sat outside in a deck chair reading a book, doing whatever. Or you're Pete Brothers, for example, who's filing down his rivets on his Hurricane. Yeah. But, it seems extraordinary now. This is a genuine Mae West. Known because it inflated your chest.
She's a famous pulchritudinous actress.
Yes, and it's this is it. Yeah. This is an original one, and this is an original service dress. Battle dress came in 1941, but they're still in their suits. So the idea is that you go to battle in your suit and tie. They were allowed to get rid of the ties. The reason they get rid of ties is because when you're flying, you're constantly looking like that. You're never still for more than a few seconds. You're constantly swiveling around. You don't want chafing around your neck. So that's why they have the silk scarves and the pellet jumpers and all the rest of it. But it seems extraordinary, doesn't it, that you would have basically a blue suit to go to war in. Germans had a slightly different thing. They'd have a jacket like this. This is a British standard flying helmet with flying goggles. The goggles, again, are just for glare, really. And this is a German one. They're the same, So it's called a flying helmet, but it's not protecting you.
No.
It is so that you can have your radio and oxygen leads all in one thing. And it's basically just a skull cap. So it's pretty basic. And you'd wear this and you'd be on edge. If you knew that you were on standby and you were expected to fly, you'd be waiting for the scramble. The scramble will be either a yell from an orderly in here who's on the telephone, or it'd be a bell, there's a scramble bell outside, and that would mean run to your planes. Your fitter and your rigger, there would be 2 guys, one would be on the mechanical side of things and one would be on the airframe, and they would start up the engine immediately, so that by the time you get there, it's already running. Your parachute would be on the wing. You'd shove that on, you step into it, strap it up, jump onto the Hurricane or your Spitfire, clamber in, and off you go. And the whole point was to try and be airborne in about 3 minutes.
So what are these people like? That's the what are the characters? That's the next question, I think.
So one of the things that always strikes me about the few, and actually this applies to the Luftwaffe as well, is just how young they all are. Very few people still flying over the age of 27. There are some, but not many.
But it's a young man's game, isn't it, this? Because you're living on your nerves. You need all of your senses and reactions to be as sharp as they possibly can. It's an athletic business being flying an airplane.
It really is, and the strain of it, both mentally and physically, is absolutely enormous. It is exhausting. Combat flying. It really is, in every single regard. But it's interesting because 32 Squadron were here flying Hurricanes, part of the Battle of Britain summer, and we mentioned Pete Brothers before, and when we were looking at the Hurricane, but also 92 Squadron, and they started off flying. I remember rightly from Norfolk, but anyway, they were flying over Dunkirk and then sent off to Pembrey in South Wales, then came back here on the 7th of September 1940. So this is Black Saturday, the day the Blitz starts. And one of those pilots was Tony Bartley, who had got his wings just after the declaration of war in September 1939, posted to 92 Squadron, and was a real sort of Jack the Lad. He was sort of tall and good looking, half Irish, had a bit of swagger about him. He turns up again at a big-in on 13th of September, I think, because he's been on leave when they've been posted from Pembrey. Gets here, flies in on an ensign, a transport plane that drops him in here. Whole place is completely pockmarked with craters. It's in a terrible state. The mess has been blown out. Half the buildings are collapsed. I mean, it looks an absolute eyesore. And when he gets there, he finds that Bob Stanford Tuck, who'd been one of the flight commanders, he's been posted to 257 Squadron to command that because they're short of commanders. The CEO was out because he set fire to himself, lighting a cigarette while he was pissed. It's all a bit of chaotic. And he goes up to Brian Kinkham, who's I think 23 or something at the time, and says, what's the form? And he goes, well, I mainly stood around Sky and shoot down Huns. It's like, okay. It's all very sort of insouciance is kind of part of it.
Yeah.
But then there was another character called Alan Wright, and Alan was much more sort of cerebral. He was quiet, a thoughtful person, didn't like going to the pub and getting drunk. I remember asking him about this, and he said, I took the view my chances of surviving would be greater if I was sober. It's absolutely inarguable.
That's one way of looking at it. Yeah. I mean, people do take it very, very seriously, though. Because one of the names on here is Adolphus Sailor Milan, who's a South African fighter pilot and a merchant seaman, which is why he's known as Sailor. And they've got it on the wall over here. His 10 rules for air fighting, and he's very serious about it. This is what you've got to do. You've got to come at this properly, and you've got to, don't shoot until you see the whites of their eyes. There's all that sort of stuff. When you go in, go hard, get out. So although there is this insouciance, and although there is this thing where they're having a drink in the evening, relieving the stress, which is, some self-medication going on, as we'd call it now, they're really, really serious about this business, aren't they? And the sort of body of experience that gets passed on is formed. It's not like the Germans where you have the aces and everyone else sort of comes along with them. There's this idea that everyone's got to take this seriously, isn't there?
Yeah, but also it's completely different cultures. So in the Luftwaffe, at the end of the day, you write up combat reports and you then sit around. You might have a little glass of wine or permit yourself a small pils. But basically what you're there is then talking about tactics and how you might improve things and what's happened that previous day. Whereas within the RAF, you are absolutely encouraged not to talk shop. Once you're stood down in the evening, you go to the pub and you just talk about girls or cricket or whatever it is you want to talk about. But you absolutely keep off the subject. Yeah. And, Downing was Commander-in-Chief of Fighter Command was very sensible. He said, everyone needs a day off every 7 and 48 hours off every 3 weeks and regular leave and all this sort of stuff. None of that in the Luftwaffe. You could get leave, but it was on an ad hoc basis and there was no kind of regularity to it. So you just, in the Luftwaffe, you're just flying and flying and flying. You're thinking flying, you're going to sleep thinking about flying, you're waking up again and you're flying again. Whereas there is an active encouragement within fighter command to let these people unwind. They're young men. They need to kind of have a bit of kind of time off. They need to sort of get off base. But that's just go somewhere. Get the kind of the day's fighting out of their heads.
But that's as much to do with the fact that the RAF here, it's within a plan. What they're doing, it's all their time's accounted for. The way the squadrons are being rotated is part of how things are organised. Yeah. Whereas the Germans are improvising. They're in a situation that, after all, they were going to overpower fighter command in 3 days, maybe 4. Yes. In which case that tempo of operations that they've committed to, that's fine if you're only doing it for a few days. Yeah. But if it's a prolonged period, it's going to get much more difficult. Whereas what fighter command have got is a thing that's with the leave baked in, the days off. They're literally using the home advantage to their own advantage, and not just in terms of being able to get more sorties up.
Yeah, but I think the other thing that Downing is very conscious of is that you're a very tight ship in a squadron. To get 12 airborne, you might have 22, 24 pilots, so almost double again that you would ever send into the air. But that means you're a very tight bunch. You're spending an awful lot of time together. You're spending basically 24/7 for the most part. And that means when losses do come in, it can really, really hit you hard. And I never forget Alan Wright telling me on the first day, they were over Dunkirk, which I think was the 23rd of May 1940. Yeah. He went up in the air with his roommate, Pat Learmont. He was his greatest friend. They went out together, they hung out together, they were like super tight. And in the first day, he saw Pat Learmont being shot down in flames. Yeah. And he came back to the mess. And there was Pat's damp towel still on his unmade bed. God. And he just thought, I can't believe this. And He said, and I went to have a hot bath, and he said, and I wept like I've never wept before or since. And then he kind of thought, right, I need to park this and get on with it.
Yeah. Well, which I suppose actually is your only option, really, isn't it, in that situation?
Yeah.
Park it and get on with it.
Yes. But it's tough, it is incredibly high pressured.
Yeah.
There's so much resting on you doing this, whether you're German or whether you're part of the RAF. The stakes are impossibly high. And, when you're one of 12 flying into a large formation of German planes, you feel very, very outnumbered, even when quite often in total you're not. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the numbers are one thing, but the pilot's experience is another, and the pilot's nerve needs to hold.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what? I always think, when I think about this stuff, I'm glad I haven't had to be put to the test like this. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It's such a source of eternal relief.
Yeah, I know. Incredible.
I mean, being able to fly anyway, the level, the technical skill involved, and then that you're flying for your life. It's a whole situation I'm glad I've never had to experience. Put it that way.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Well, I mean, the home advantage for Fighter Command, I mean, it almost sounds, when you say it out loud like that, it almost sounds trite, doesn't it? Yeah. Oh, they've got the home advantage, because this isn't a game of football. This is a life or death struggle.
No, but you'll take any advantage you can have.
Yeah.
And there's some considerable ones.
Yeah, in military speak would be called a force multiplier. Yes. Basically, every squadron, flying 11 group, for instance, because it's based basically where the battle is happening, can get its planes up and down more often in a day than the Germans, who have to fly all the way here and all the way back. So that's your first...
Although curiously, they tend not to.
Yeah.
They flew much less than the Luftwaffe pilot.
Yeah, which is interesting, because they don't necessarily need to, because the way the fighter cover's worked out. Yeah. But the point is, there's your first advantage. You get more hours flying if you need them, or more out of each sortie. And
because you've got this air defence system, the ground controllers can anticipate, and they can deploy their aircraft to the best of their advantages.
Yeah.
Whereas the Luftwaffe, of course, have got to get from wherever they are in France, then across the Channel, then up the leg of Kent or wherever they've got to get to.
Yeah.
So that's all the time, that's eating up fuel.
Well, exactly. So the effective part of your sortie, if you're flying out of a Fighter Command airfield, is the entire sortie. The effective part of the German sortie is the bit when they get to here.
Right.
So in terms of time spent, time wasted,
yes,
the Germans are wasting an awful lot of time, an awful lot of fuel, and obviously their pilots' nerve. We keep talking about this, the strain these people are under.
Yeah.
You're in an ME-109, which is an interceptor that's designed to intercept and shoot down. But what you're doing is you're going around in circles off the Pas de Calais, waiting for the bombers to turn up. Yep. The bombers turn up, maybe they make the rendezvous, maybe they don't.
And you're looking at your fuel gauge going
exactly. And your nervous anticipation of getting over Britain increases as the sortie goes on. So
and it's all very well saying you've only got 10 minutes over the combat zone, but you've got to extricate yourself from that combat zone. And sometimes that might not be easy if you've got a fighter on your tail.
Yeah, exactly.
So and this leads to the next home advantage, which is if you do happen to get hit, but you're okay as a pilot and you manage to bail out, you can be back at the squadron for tea and flying again at 4:15.
Yeah.
Whereas for a Luftwaffe guy, you're out of the action. For you, the war is over, my friend.
You're lost to the Luftwaffe. So as well as attriting airframes, the Luftwaffe are attriting pilots in that regard. So even if the pilot survives, he's off the ledger. Yeah. Whereas an RAF pilot, as you say, he can be back at his squadron, shot down. The locals hopefully don't pitchfork him. Mm-hmm. He's picked up by the police. He's brought back to his station, or brought to another station, then flown to his station. Yeah. So that's all. There's that churn that's an advantage for Fighter Command.
There is also another advantage, I think, which is a cultural one, and I do think that the slightly easier take that Fighter Command has on its pilots in terms of what they're expecting from them is an advantage.
Yeah.
And an obvious home advantage is being welcomed into a pub. Now, different squadrons, for example, had completely different cultures. Some were had a kind of boozy mentality. Others didn't. We've mentioned 92 Squadron quite a lot. Yeah. They were definitely a boozy culture kind of squadron.
Yeah.
They liked to go out and party.
Yeah.
Alan Wright might have kind of eschewed such things and stayed at home reading an improving novel or whatever. But the vast majority of them piled into the squadron truck and went down to the White Hart at Brasted, which coincidentally is precisely what we're about to do now.
Okay.
You know, I think we've earned it, don't
It's
you?
your round.
You know, it's been hard work today.
No, it's your round. Before we get anywhere, we need to establish who's round here. Here we are, White Hart in 1885.
Yep, so it's definitely here in 1940.
Yep. So, Jim, pints,
Yes.
a convivial atmosphere.
Yes.
I mean, the one thing that I think is probably missing is probably the fug of fag smoke that would have been pipe smoke that would have been the fumes of the time, right?
Yeah, well, we've come to the White Hart in Brasted,
Yep.
which is just a few miles down the hill from Biggin Hill. And it was very often frequented by the pilots of Biggin Hill.
Yeah.
They come, pile into a truck, and off they go. 92 Squadron, the first day that Tony Bartley's back, he piles in with the rest of them. Alan Wright goes off and has a quiet night on his own.
Yeah.
The rest of them go in and they all shout out and sing out, "We're 92 Fighter Squadron," at the top of their voice. Pile in here. There's some identical twins called the McNeil sisters, who everyone hits on. and Tony goes, "Where are all these pints coming from?" And Brian Kinker goes, "Who cares?"
Yeah. Well, who cares?
You know, they're just here. And I think this is the point, is that, you know, every night they can go to the pub and everyone pats them on the back and says what fantastic people they are.
Well, and I think one of the other pieces of the home advantage, right, is that you are defending your homeland, aren't you? The German sorties here, what are they for really? What do the pilots really think they're doing? You may have people, you know, bomber crews have qualms about bombing a city or whatever, whereas there's just one thing for the fighter command guys to do, and that's defend their country, right?
Absolutely, and they have a culture of, when they're stood down, of just taking it easier.
Yeah.
You know, some are more boozy than others. 92 Squadron definitely has a culture of going to the pub every night. I mean, you know, even on the morning of the 15th of September, Battle of Britain Day, they're nursing hangovers again.
Yeah.
You know, because they just go out every single night and absolutely cane it.
Yeah. And
Here.
And this isn't something that the higher ups are trying to stop, is it? There's no sense that you know, chaps, you really ought to not go to the pub tonight.
No, and they're quite often sort of getting down to the airfield at kind of 4:30 in the morning. It's like now September, so they're not getting quite as early as they had been in high summer.
Yeah.
But they're getting down here very, very early. You know, get into the cockpit, take a whole host of, you know, big breath of oxygen, pop a bit of Benzedrine or something.
Sort yourself out for the day.
Sort yourself out for the day, ready to sort of scrap with the Hun.
I mean, it is interesting, isn't it? Because one of the perceptions of the Battle of Britain, isn't it, is that these are pilots who are, you know, they're really up against it, that there's a sense that lots of them haven't had as much training as maybe they could. They're flung into the fray, but actually morale holds up really, really pretty well during the Battle of Britain, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it does, and I think part of it is because they do have this culture of not dwelling on what they've done, and when they come down to places like the White Hart in Brasted, they're made to feel like they're heroes.
Yeah.
And they're all young. You know, what were you doing when you were 21?
Well, I mean, I wasn't soaring through the.
No, but what were you doing every night?
The azure blue. I was going to the pub. Yeah, falling off my moped.
The point is, these guys are no different from us. They find themselves caught up in this incredible conflict. They find themselves in the summer of 1940, in the case of Fighter Command, fighting for their country, fighting for Britain. But they're still young guys.
Well, and being a pilot must be very. I mean, yes, there's the fear of it all, but it's exciting too, isn't it?
Yeah, and at the end of the day, you've got through another day. You don't have to worry about death and destruction and your imminent demise until the following morning.
Yeah.
So let's have a few drinks. Let's let your hair down and crack on.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Obviously, this pub has changed a great deal, but there are things here from the Battle of Britain, things to remind you about the air crews.
There's a very famous blackboard.
With
all the signatures on, including Brian Kinkham and Pete Brothers and others that we've mentioned.
And the fantastic picture of Bob Stanford Tuck, with all the swastikas marking out his kills on his Hurricane. They're doing pretty well doing that in a Hurricane, it's got to be said.
Yeah.
We love the Hurricane, and we want to make it absolutely clear that we do still love the Hurricane, and anyone out there who thinks we've dissed the Hurricane during this series, just back off. Yeah.
In this episode, we've been talking about the famous few, and who they were, and some of the characters, and kind of things they got up to. But who are they facing?
Yeah.
We've talked about the fighters. What were the bombers? What were the bombers trying to do? What was the German strategy? What was the German attitude? And that is where we're going to be heading next.
So, the other side of the hill, as they say.
Other side of the hill. Anyway.
Cheers.